Hey guys, welcome back. All right, so today what we're going to be talking about is setting up a conflict game mode. Now, we're going to do this in a PvE setting since I know a lot more about how to do that. PvP is very simple with playable factions and stuff, but I'll be explaining that through and you can kind of get the idea and move things around. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up layers. What we're going to do is we're going to have a US layer, and then we're also going to have a USSR layer. Basically very simple. We're going to be talking about BLUFOR and OPFOR. Of course, you can change these to however it makes you relate to them better, but this is just how I do it, so this is how we're going to be. All right, so we're going to talk about the BLUFOR faction. BLUFOR faction is going to be the player base. So we need to put down a base for them to spawn at. So very simply, we're going to type in the search bar conflict M. This is going to be the conflict military base. We're just going to go ahead and plop that down as so. Now we're going to go ahead and have this the front entrance facing towards the airstrip. So very simply, you can very easily do that by pressing E, and then you can rotate this 90 degrees this way. Now I'm going to explain a little bit more about this. This blue arrow is always going to be the front of the object. So if it was a car, the front engine or wherever the driver is looking would be facing towards the airfield. If it's a building, the main entrance would be looking towards the airfield as well. Now, when you place down these assets here, like building structures and stuff, you'll be able to see them, so you can angle them very easily. But for things like military bases, ambient AI, which we'll talk about in a later video, just know that this blue arrow is always facing the direction you would like them to see. Now, you can quickly change these certain settings up here on top. If we hit Q, we have ground manipulation tool. If we hit W, we can move this around however we see fit. As you can see, we can mess with things in the arrows, or we can just click on these boxes here and move them as such. E is the rotational, so we can go ahead and rotate things in a very weird way if we want to. But for now, we're just going to keep it on W. Now, what we're also going to do is to make sure this snaps to the terrain, we're going to do left control, left shift, down arrow key on your keyboard. And that's going to allow it to snap to the terrain, so it looks nice and pretty. So there we go. So we got the US military base set up first, but we still have a lot more to do. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to have the campaign military base component. We want to make sure we set this as an HQ. HQ is always going to be the starting base. Make sure there's only about one for the enemy faction for PvE. You can have multiple for the player base faction. Basically what it does, it's just going to pick one of the set HQs that you have set around the map, and that's going to be a starting position. We can go ahead and change the name of the base name. It's just going to grab the closest symbol and call it good. We're just going to leave it by this up by default, but you can go ahead and change it if you see fit. There's nothing else we need to change here, so we're going to keep going. We don't really need to work with the campaign military base map description. Seizing component, we're going to turn it off. Your HQ should generally be turned off unless you want like a total control situation for your game mode of conflict if you're doing PvP. If you want the enemy to actually move in through and cut off the enemy force completely, you'll make a lot of enemies by doing that, just letting you know. Campaign supplies component, you don't really need to change this, but I like to do for safekeeping for the HQ is always put a 0 at the end to make it a lot larger so the player base has resources on hand so they can do what they need to do. Coverage radio component, this is going to be very important with the new 1.2 update. You want to make sure that your HQ is set to is source. So you want to go ahead and hit that. We're going to test this out. I was playing around with this earlier. They did change a lot of things with editor. But I don't think this needs to be set, but we're just going to leave this blank for now. We'll test this later. Edible system, we don't need to change this. Faction affiliation, make sure you set this to the faction ID for BLUFOR. In this case, base game is US. If you're doing like something like RHS, you would have to change, like it's like called RHS underscore blah, 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 blah. There's a lot into it, which I will not be going through in these videos. You can easily figure that out. It's very, very simple. And if you have any more questions, you can always leave a comment down below and I can definitely give you the answer for that. Now, what we're going to do here, we're going to go ahead and set the spawn points. By default, it's always going to be FIA. Go ahead and set them to US. And I kind of leave everything up at the faction affiliation. These three are not important. So we can quickly move in through here and set this as US. If you don't want the base fob, if you want to say it, not have any AI, you can just go ahead and disable that like that. So that will not spawn any AI. We don't need to worry about any of this stuff here. We're going to leave this enabled for the tutorial here for today. And so now our US space is set. So now players will be able to spawn there and have a good time. Now we need to talk about the USSR. So if we go ahead and zoom out, I want to go ahead and put the first point for the players to capture. Now you see this blue circle. This is basically the capture radius. So when you put down the radio, it's basically saying, hey, we can communicate up to here. So for example, if I go ahead and leave it as this, blue arrow stops right here. If I put a point right here, this space will not communicate with this space, which thus you won't be able to capture. So you want to kind of do like a domino effect, like move things moving forward and stuff. You can always change this radio frequency radius though, if you want to. Go ahead and go into the coverage radio component, and then you can go ahead and change this. So for instance, if I change this to 1500, we can see we pushed out the circle. So if you are in a situation or you're using a map where the first point, let's say you want the player base to spawn on an island, but the next base is like 3,000 clicks away, you just set it to the desired area and you'll hit it. Keep in mind though, if you make the circle big enough, you won't be able to see it. So you're going to have to like open up the map and just try to figure things out. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to set the first capture point for the USSR. So we're going to have this farm, Les Clés. I don't know how to say it. Who cares? We're going to go ahead and set this here. I don't care how it looks. We're just going to snap it to the terrain with left control, left shift, plus down arrow key. And we're going to go down. Since we want this to be a capture point, we're going to say it's control point. We're going to leave this the same. You can go ahead and change this to however you want. For example, let's say I want to make sure this actually says Les Clés. So I'm going to call it like that. And before you guys say in the comments that that's not how I pronounce it, I do not care. Anyways, there we go. Make sure I don't misspell it because I am dyslexic. There we go. Perfect. We're going to go back down the line. Season component. We're going to make sure this is on. Now, the maximum and minimum season time, this is all in seconds. So, for example, if you want the player base to take longer, let's say 5 minutes, I'm going to change both of these so it's exactly 5 minutes, which is going to be 300 seconds. If I wanted to be between a certain time period, let's say minimum is going to be 5 minutes and maximum is going to be 4 minutes. I can just do that, and then it'll just pick a random number value in there when players get there and start capturing. So, do that as you see fit. Coverage supplies don't matter. Coverage radio component doesn't matter. Again, based on what I was talking about before, if it needs to hit another area. We're going to go ahead and change the faction affiliation to USSR. Spawn point USSR. And there we go. So now we have this. It's always good to be organized as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this to Leclerc. And I'm going to end with USSR. I don't want to leave it just like this because up in here in these default tab in Eden, this is also here. So if you leave it like that, for example, I'm just going to go ahead. Oh, wow, it did it. Okay. A lot of areas will actually say, no, you can't do that. So just keep that in mind. Good practice. I just always end it with whatever faction is related to that point. All right. So there we go. We have that. Now we can't leave it like that. If we're talking about like a PvE thing, we need to go ahead and set up a control base for the AI. So we're going to keep the USSR tab. We're going to go ahead and find somewhere where the player base can't find. So we're just going to say this little island right here. We're going to place this down right here. We're going to go down the lines again. We're going to say is an HQ. Season component, we're going to turn it off. Supplies, doesn't matter. Radio component, we're going to say is the source. Usually HQs are always going to be a source. Make sure there's only one that can actually pop in. We're going to head it with USSR here. And since it's on a little island, we're going to turn off the AI so the player base doesn't get confused. And I'm just going to simply call this control USSR. I always like calling it the control base because we need something for the AI to be able to relate to, like some sort of HQ. All right, so there we go. We got everything. Now we're going to go ahead and test it. First thing first, though, I'm going to go and double check my faction manager. Since we are doing a PvE setup, I want to make sure my BLUFOR is set to playable. It is perfect. Let's go and check Soviet Union, and they are not playable. Perfect. So now we have a PvE setup. All right, let's go ahead and try this out. Hopefully everything works. All right, everything is looking good. We can select US. We can select this. We have a spawn point. We can see Michigan. Fantastic. And we're going to make sure everything's going good. First thing first, I want to make sure you guys can kind of see what's going on. We're going to turn up the time there since we didn't change any of those properties. US composition. We're just going to place down a radio relay just to ensure. We just raised. He's going to go off and talk again. So we're going to take a look over here. Yep. Okay, so now we got the OPFOR spawning. As we can see, the USSR boys are here. Now we're going to make sure we can actually capture it. We're going to go and kill them. We're going to teleport. And we are seizing. So we know everything is working as intended. So fantastic. So now we have the base set up now. Now we actually have things going on. Everything is working as intended for us to snowball down the line. Hey, thanks for watching. If you learned something today, go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. And if there's something that you'd like to see as a tutorial, please let me know. Also, be sure to check out my Twitch. I sometimes do dev streams from time to time, so you might be able to learn something from there. Anyways, take it easy. Bye-bye.